Compare and contrast essay. Compare and contrast essays may be required in many different classes: literature, history, social sciences, art, and others. Whatever the topic of your essay, the ability to compare and contrast is an essential skill involving critical and analytical thinking. Introduction. The purpose of a comparison and contrast essay is to analyze the similarities, compare, and differences, contrast, usually between two things and sometimes among three or more things. Your reader will be looking for a clear and organized presentation of your facts with strong transitions to make the relationships easy to understand. You can begin brainstorming your essay by compiling two separate lists: one, a list of the similarities between the two subjects, and another, a list of the differences. Making these lists can help you narrow the focus of your paper and identify the points of comparison you want to explore. For instance, if you are comparing two statues, you might look at the medium, the time periods in which they were produced, their size, the materials used, their subjects, and so on. Comparison and contrast essays are typically organized in one of two ways: the block method or the alternating method. For guidance, refer to Organizational Structures for Comparison and Contrast Essays to follow. You may find that you develop new ideas as you write your draft. That's fine. Make a note of them and decide if you want to incorporate them in your next draft. It's wise to write a complete draft and leave it alone for a day or two. Go back and reread what you've written. Are the similarities and differences clear? Have you given more or less equal attention to the subjects you're comparing? Is there information missing? Revise to ensure your essay is clear, complete, and free of errors. Organizational Structures for Comparison and Contrast Essays. There are two common organizational approaches for the comparison and contrast essay: the alternating method and the block method. Each has its own pattern. Alternating method. The alternating method can be most successful when you have closely related ideas and information about both A and B that lends itself to a point-by-point style of comparison. Introductory paragraph. Discussion of A and B with reference to first point of comparison. Discussion of A and B with reference to second point of comparison. Discussion of A and B with reference to third point of comparison. Conclusion. Block method. The block method is most useful when your content does not lend itself to a point-by-point comparison between A and B. The block method is also useful when your ideas about B build on your ideas about A. It's a sensible structure to use when you want to compare and contrast three or more subjects. To help your reader follow your argument, present the different points of comparison in parallel. Introductory paragraph. Discussion of A. Point 1, Point 2, Point 3. Discussion of B. Point 1, Point 2, Point 3. Conclusion. Do choose a basis for comparison. For most topics, you will need to limit the scope of your essay. For instance, in the example about cats and dogs to follow, the writer has chosen to focus on how these animals relate to people. An essay that attempts to explore all the similarities and differences between cats and dogs would be enormously long and complex. Do develop a thesis for your essay. It's not enough simply to list the similarities and differences between the items you're comparing. Your essay should have a focus that ties together all the information you intend to present. One way to begin to develop your thesis is to consider whether similarities outweigh differences or vice versa, and develop from there. Do use an outline. Not all writers like to outline before they write, but for this assignment, an outline is a must-have in order to help you organize your information. Your outline can be informal, and it's fine to use reverse outlining after you've started writing, but it's wise to outline at some point to ensure you're writing a balanced and complete essay. Refer back to the discussion on reverse outlining early in the book. Do use transitional language to improve the unity of your essay and advance your argument. Useful words include like, similar to, both, similarly, in the same way, share, have in common, also, unlike, differ, however, although, in contrast, while, and on the other hand, among others. Do use topic sentences. Topic sentences at the beginning of each of your paragraphs help the reader follow your argument as it develops. For more on topic sentences, refer back to the section Writing Strong Paragraphs. Do devote more or less equal space and attention to the items you're comparing. Don't choose subjects that cannot be easily compared. If you've been asked to come up with your own topic for your essay, take care in choosing a project you can accomplish easily and successfully. For instance, an essay that compares and contrasts two paintings will be easier and probably more successful than an essay that discusses a painting and a novel. Don't neglect your introduction. Your introduction and thesis establish not just the topic, but also the basis of comparison. Your thesis presents an idea that you're going to try to prove. Without a proper introduction, your paper will likely read like a list of attributes with very little point. For guidance in developing a thesis statement, refer back to How to Write a Thesis Statement. Don't try to combine the two organizational styles in a single essay. Your essay will be easier to follow if you choose either the alternating or the block format and stick with it throughout. Don't write an unbalanced essay that devotes far more attention to one item than the other. Both items should receive equal or nearly equal treatment. Examples. Example 1. Title: A cat or a dog. Thesis: Although cats and dogs are both very popular companion animals, prospective pet owners should understand the unique characteristics of each before deciding which animal to adopt. Alternating method. Training: Both will accept a certain amount of training. Cats: difficult to train, limited results. Dogs: pliable and easy to train, accept and even welcome training. House training: Both can be house trained. Cats: use litter box instinctually. Dogs: require extensive house training. Social behavior: Both can make good companions for humans. Cats: primarily attached to territory rather than to companions. Dogs: pack animals primarily attached to companions. Block method. Cats: training, will accept a certain amount of training but difficult to train, limited results. House training uses litter box instinctually. Social behavior can make good companions for humans but primarily attached to territory rather than companions. Dogs: training, pliable and easy to train, accept and even welcome training. House training, require extensive house training. Social behavior can make good companions for humans, pack animals, primarily attached to companions. Example number 2. The eating disorders bulimia and anorexia are sometimes confused with one another. Both tend to affect women more than men, and both can have serious, even fatal consequences. However, the two disorders are associated with different symptoms, behaviors, and medical risks, and parents of girls and young women should understand what to look for. Alternating method. 1. Symptoms: anorexia, depression, fatigue, weight loss. Bulimia, depression, fatigue, maintain stable weight. 2. Behaviors. Both. Extreme concern with thinness, excessive exercise. Anorexia. Avoid eating/weigh food and count calories. Bulimia. Binge and purge. 3. Medical risks. Both. Depression. Anorexia. Bone density loss, kidney damage, cessation of menstrual periods. Bulimia. Damage to digestive tract, stomach pains, tooth decay, organ damage. Both can result in death. Block method. 1. Anorexia. Symptoms: depression, fatigue, weight loss. Behaviors: extreme concern with thinness, excessive exercise, avoid eating/weigh food, and count calories. Medical risks: depression, bone density loss, kidney damage, cessation of menstrual periods, death. 2. Bulimia. Symptoms: depression, fatigue, maintain stable weight. Behaviors: extreme concern with thinness, excessive exercise, binge and purge. Medical risks: damage to digestive tract, stomach pains, tooth decay, organ damage, death. Argumentative essay. An argumentative essay requires you to take a position on a controversial issue and argue in favor of your position, defending it against opposing arguments. It also usually requires that you conduct research and present evidence from various external sources. Introduction. The purpose of writing an argumentative essay is to develop your ability to reason and think critically about various issues. As you work on your paper, assume that your reader is a fair-minded person who does not have a strong opinion about the issue you are discussing. Your job is to provide background information and compelling arguments to persuade him to agree with you. Brainstorm widely from both sides of the question and conduct research. It's wise to organize your material by writing a formal outline. Winging it generally doesn't work, partly because you are likely to have a lot of data to manage and partly because it's hard to organize when you feel strongly about something. Lay out your argument logically and dispassionately, and your essay will be more convincing. If you prefer not to outline before you start writing, be sure to create a reverse outline. Refer back to that early section of this book, of your first draft, so that you're clear about the structure. Don't censor yourself as you write your draft. Instead, plan to go through several rounds of drafting and revising. Reread your first draft. Are your arguments strong? Do you offer enough support? You might find you need to go back and do more brainstorming and research. Revise to tighten your argument. Remember to proofread carefully, as errors can undermine your credibility. Model outline. A common organizational structure for an argumentative essay is the 5-paragraph format. It is not the only option, but it can be useful. Paragraph 1. Present your topic and state your thesis. Paragraphs 2 through 4. Provide several arguments supporting your thesis statement. Offer evidence in the form of facts, statistics, and corroboration from writers who agree with you. Present the opposing side's arguments and refute them. Paragraph 5. Conclude your essay. Rather than just repeating your thesis statement, revisit it. State it another way in light of the evidence offered in your essay. Do choose your topic carefully. If you're free to choose any topic you wish, make sure you select one that has enough information available on both sides of the question. If you've been given a choice of topics, pick one that really interests you. You're going to be spending a fair amount of time on this assignment, so make sure it's something you're comfortable with and can engage with. Do your research. Make sure you understand all sides of the question, not just the side you happen to agree with. Do think before you write. Are you sure which side you're on? Don't be afraid to let the other side in. Your essay will ultimately be stronger if you truly understand the opposing point of view. Do come up with a clear and defensible thesis statement. You're going to organize your entire essay around this thesis statement, so make sure you're comfortable with it. Consider these two thesis statements, for example. Marijuana should be legalized, and marijuana is no worse than alcohol. The ideas are similar, but the essays that follow them will be significantly different. Be sure you have a very precise idea what you're arguing for. Do think of several key reasons your thesis statement is correct. There may be many, but focus on the 2 or 3 you find most convincing. You won't be able to use all of them. Do collect evidence that supports your thesis and present it in the essay. Evidence may be expert opinions, statistics, facts, and research findings. Do present the opposing side's arguments fairly and refute those claims. You gain nothing by trying to make others' arguments look weaker than they are. Take them on directly and argue against them, presenting evidence to support your position. Do limit your supporting paragraphs to one topic each. Do use clear and logical transitions between paragraphs. Do cite your sources. If you use other sources to support your argument, use the appropriate citation format to give credit where credit is due. Do conclude strongly. Use your last paragraph to wrap up your argument, refer to important points in the essay, and revisit your thesis statement in light of the information you have just presented. Don't overuse I think or I believe in your essay. It's understood that you are expressing your opinion, and these phrases tend to weaken your argument. Don't offer only moral or religious claims as evidence. Your essay should present facts that can be independently confirmed. Don't take for granted that the reader will agree with you about any facet of your argument. You must present evidence to support all your assertions. Don't ignore opposing viewpoints. You have to acknowledge them and answer them. They won't go away. Don't invent evidence to support your argument. You'll get caught. Don't insult or denigrate those who disagree with you. Don't introduce any new information or arguments in the concluding paragraph. He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. John Stuart Mill, British philosopher. Like this. In 1984, Congress passed the National Minimum Age Drinking Act, effectively raising the legal drinking age to 21 in all 50 United States. The objective was to prevent alcohol-related deaths in young people ages 18 to 21. However, the act is inconsistent with the other responsibilities and expectations American society places on 18-year-olds. What's more, the act has not actually had the anticipated benefit of fewer drunk driving deaths, in spite of what some of its supporters claim. Because it has unfairly infringed on the rights of young Americans, and because it has failed in its stated objective, the National Minimum Age Drinking Act should be repealed. The author presents a strong thesis statement. The United States entrusts all citizens ages 18 and up with the right to vote. This right is provided for in the U.S. Constitution. Voting is a serious responsibility. The consequences of elections, especially national elections, can be very profound and far-reaching, not just in the United States, but also around the world. If 18-year-olds were entrusted by the Founding Fathers with the right to vote in all elections, it makes no sense that this same group of people should be forbidden to have a glass of wine in a restaurant. The second paragraph develops one point in support of the thesis statement. The right to vote is not the only responsibility given by the government to 18-year-old citizens. Young Americans are eligible to be drafted into military service starting at age 18. At various periods in history, 18-year-old males were routinely drafted into the U.S. military and expected to fight in service of their country. Although the draft has not been in effect since 1973, young people are still required to register for the draft when they turn 18. In fact, failure to register is considered a felony. Footnote 1. Conscription in the United States Wikipedia, last modified February 27, 2013, http://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/conscription_the_united_states. If 18-year-olds are expected by society to go to war and risk their lives in the service of their country, why are they not permitted to order a beer with their pizza? The third paragraph develops a second point in support of the thesis statement. Finally, supporters of the National Minimum Age Drinking Act claim that it has saved 20,000 lives by preventing individuals under the age of 21 from drinking legally. This statement is not accurate. In fact, researchers Peter Ash and David Levy found that the, quote, minimum legal drinking age is not a significant or even perceptible factor in the fatality experience of all drivers or of young drivers. Footnote number 2. Peter Ash and David Levy, The Drinking Age and Traffic Safety. Cato Institute, accessed April 19, 2013. http://www.cato.org/pubs/regulation/v11n2/v11n2-8.pdf. Ash and Levy demonstrated that raising the drinking age simply transferred the deaths from the 18 to 21 age bracket into the 21 to 24 age bracket. In other words, equal numbers of people are still dying as a result of drunk driving. They're just dying slightly later. Clearly, the problem here is the misuse of alcohol rather than the age of the drivers. Drunk driving is the problem that needs to be addressed, and raising the drinking age has not addressed it. The Act is therefore not justified by any increase in safety or decrease in fatalities among the group the Act claims to protect. The fourth paragraph presents yet another point in support of the thesis. It fairly states the position of the opposition and refutes it using results from a research study. The study is cited appropriately so that readers can consult it if they wish. Young people in the United States are growing up faster and faster, and greater demands are being put on them. In general, they are proud to embrace the responsibilities they are entrusted with. Forbidding them to drink alcohol, while at the same time expecting they shoulder full adult responsibilities, is unfair and unjustifiable. The National Minimum Age Drinking Act has failed in its goal to reduce deaths from drunk driving and has only succeeded in limiting the rights of young Americans ages 18 to 21. The Act has been in force since 1984, and it is long past time for it to go. The conclusion refers back to the arguments made earlier in the essay and presents the thesis again in light of those arguments. They say, I say. Some strategies for quoting and responding to sources. In most argumentative essays, regardless of the topic or the class, you'll be responding to the ideas of other scholars, critics, and researchers. They say, I say, The Moves That Matter in Academic Writing is a useful book that offers strategies for framing your argument in the context of what others have written. Here are a few sample templates excerpted from They Say, I Say. Templates for introducing what they say. Americans today tend to believe that blank. In discussions of X, one controversial issue has been blank. On the one hand, blank argues blank. On the other hand, blank contends blank. Others even maintain blank, blank. My own view is that blank. Templates for introducing quotations. X states, quote, blank, end quote. In her book, Blank, X maintains that, quote, blank, end quote, Templates for explaining quotations. In other words, X believes blank. In making this comment, X argues that blank. Templates for disagreeing with reasons. I think X is mistaken because she overlooks blank. I disagree with X's view that blank because, as recent research has shown, blank. Templates for agreeing. X is surely right about blank because recent studies have shown that blank. I agree that blank, a point that needs emphasizing because so many people believe blank. Template for agreeing and disagreeing simultaneously. X is right that blank, but she seems on more dubious ground when she claims that blank. For more templates and a comprehensive exploration of how to engage in the academic conversation, see They Say, I Say, The Moves That Matter in Academic Writing by Gerald Graff and Kathy Birkenstein, New York, W. W. Norton, 2nd edition, 2010. Plagiarism and how to avoid it. Plagiarism is the practice of falsely representing as one's own any language, thoughts, ideas, designs, or expression in a paper, exam, or other work. Different schools, colleges, and universities may have slightly different definitions of the term, but they all amount to the same thing. Plagiarism means taking someone else's words, ideas, or work and passing them off as yours. Plagiarism is a serious violation of academic rules at every school, college, and university. The consequences of plagiarism can be very serious, ranging from failing the class to being placed on academic probation to, in some cases, being kicked out of the school entirely. It's critical that you understand what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. Plagiarism isn't confined only to work done in an educational context. Plagiarism also occurs in the work world in the form of theft of original material for articles, books, journalistic reports, investigative reports, designs of all kinds, proposals, and many other work-related documents. If anything, the world of work is even less tolerant of plagiarism than the world of education. So, you're well advised to understand the concept thoroughly to avoid running into serious trouble at work. Common forms of plagiarism. Plagiarism may take many forms. Here are some of the more common forms that occur in an academic setting. Copying words or ideas from printed sources, books, journals, magazines, and so on, without citing the sources properly. Copying words or ideas from web pages without citing the sources properly. Copying all or part of another student's work and passing it off as yours. Buying essays or papers from others, including off the internet, and passing them off as your own. What do I have to acknowledge? The following guidelines apply to every academic discipline and every class you take. When you use someone else's words, phrases, sentences, and paragraphs in your work, you must enclose them in quotation marks and give the writer credit by citing your source appropriately. When you use someone else's ideas in your work, you must cite the source. When you use someone else's original research in your work, you must cite that source. Do I have to cite everything? No. You have to cite only that material that is the intellectual work of another person. If the piece of information you want to use is considered common knowledge, you do not have to cite it. If you have any questions about what is considered common knowledge in your field, ask your instructor. Here are some examples. Common knowledge. Drunk driving is a risk on the road. Not common knowledge. Over 1.41 million drivers were arrested in 2010 for driving under the influence of alcohol or narcotics. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Crime in the United States, 2010. Accessed April 19, 2013. www.fbi.gov/about-us/CJIS/CRIME-in-the-U.S/2010/crime-in-the-U.S.-10-TBL29.xls. Common knowledge. Los Angeles has a large Central American population. Not common knowledge. In 2009, almost 1 in 5 Central American immigrants to the United States lived in the Los Angeles area. Aaron Terezas, Central American Immigrants in the United States. Migration Policy Institute, January 2011. www.migrationinformation.org/USFocus/display.CFM?ID=821. Common knowledge. Edvard Munch's Scream is one of the most widely recognized paintings in the world. Not common knowledge. Edvard Munch's Scream was sold for $119.9 million. Jory Finkel. Edvard Munch's $119.9 million The Scream to go on view at MoMA. Los Angeles Times, September 18, 2012. http://articles.latytimes.com/2012/set/18-enterainment/LAT-hyphen-ET-hyphen-CM-hyphen-record-setting-2-go-on-view-at-hyphen-MoMA-201-20918. Common knowledge. Teenagers tend to take more risks than young children. Not common knowledge. The rate of injury and death for adolescents is 200 times greater than that for young children. Rebecca Boyle. Science confirms the obvious. Teenagers take more risks than adults. Pop Sci, October 15, 2012. www.popsci.com/science/article/2012-10/science-confirms-obvious-teenagers-do-more-risky-things-adults. Do. Do ensure you have read and understand your school's policy on plagiarism. If you don't know where to find it, ask. If you don't understand it, ask your instructor to clarify it for you. Do keep careful notes as you do research. When you're reading a lot about a subject, it's easy to forget where you read an idea. It's also surprisingly easy to forget having read about that idea and to begin to think that it's really yours. Be aware of these risks and carefully notate the reading you do for your research. Do use books and journal articles in your field as models for how to cite and quote sources. Published material will demonstrate the correct way to acknowledge the work of other scholars, critics, and researchers. Do quote. If you really want to use someone else's words in your essay, you're allowed to do that. Sometimes the words of others can be an excellent source of support for your own arguments. But you must quote those words properly, that is, enclose the words, accurately transcribed, in quotation marks in your essay, along with a complete citation of the source where you found them. Do paraphrase. Paraphrasing is another good way to borrow someone else's ideas while giving appropriate credit to the original thinker. When you paraphrase, you restate someone else's ideas in your own words. But although the words may be original to you, the ideas aren't, so you still need to cite them. Do familiarize yourself with the appropriate citation documentation format for your field. Different fields of study have different preferred formats for citation and documentation of sources. Common formats include MLA, APA, Chicago, and Turabian. refer back to the section Common Citation Style Guides for Papers. Ask your instructor which format to use and get a copy of the appropriate style guide. If you have questions about formatting and cannot find the answer in the appropriate style guide, ask your instructor for help. Don't assume you're safe from charges of plagiarism if you simply list all your sources in your bibliography. If you mention ideas or quote words from those sources in your paper, you must acknowledge them in the body of your paper, using the documentation format appropriate to your field. Don't assume you won't get caught, because it's extremely likely that you will. The stylistic signs of plagiarism are typically very easy for your instructor to identify. In addition, your instructor is thoroughly familiar with the sources you're using and will almost certainly spot any swiped ideas and words. The advent of the Internet has made it a great deal easier to research and retrieve published work, which makes it easier for your instructor to pinpoint the exact source of stolen ideas or text. Don't think that you're the one super smart, super crafty student who's going to get away with it. I'm telling you, they've seen your type before, and other people have thought up the same trick you have. In addition, all the time you spend figuring out how to get away with plagiarism is time you could better have spent coming up with your own original ideas and avoiding the problem altogether. Don't think it's worth the risk. Plagiarism is never the solution to whatever problem you're facing with your paper or your studies. If you're starting your paper too late or having some other difficulties, you're far better off asking your instructor for an extension than turning in a plagiarized paper. Why is plagiarism such a big deal? There are several reasons plagiarism is important. First, it's a legal issue. Stealing is stealing. Authors have ownership and copyright on the content they've created. Plagiarism also violates simple fairness. Consider how you might feel if you'd knocked yourself out to write a book or an article, possibly spending years on the work, and then someone came along and pretended your work was his. In addition, plagiarism speaks to your own sense of morality and personal integrity. Are you a cheat? Are you dishonest? No, and you don't want to be. Finally, plagiarism undermines the very educational process you're in school to experience. Ultimately, you're there to learn by doing the work yourself, coming up with your own ideas and expressing them in your own words. When you plagiarize, you not only violate the rights of others, you also cheat yourself. Interpretive essay. An interpretive essay is a paper in which you analyze a literary work or some other piece of writing. Interpretive essays are often assigned in English, literature, and writing classes. Although an interpretive essay depends on your understanding about the facts of the piece, it also requires that you develop and defend your own opinion about that piece. As its name suggests, it's an opportunity for you to interpret what you've read. Introduction. The purpose of an interpretive essay is to explain the meaning, or one of the meanings, of a literary work or other piece of writing. Assume that your reader is someone who is interested in the topic but not an expert. You should be able to explain your interpretation and defend it in a way that's understandable to the average reader. Read the work carefully, more than once if you can, and see what ideas occur to you. Take notes as you read. Develop a thesis statement and brainstorm content that will support your thesis. Don't be rigid about your thesis until you feel you've found enough content to support it. Reviewing the piece may cause you to refine or even change your thesis. Be open to this process and don't rush through it. Once you have your thesis and supporting content, organize your essay. The model outline to follow offers a useful organizational structure. Plan to go through more than one draft of your interpretive essay. Write a first draft and then take at least a short break from it. When you return to reread your draft, ask yourself if it flows well and if the evidence is convincing. You may find you need to go back to the text for more content or to do more brainstorming. You may also find that you have inadvertently included material that's not relevant. Take some time to revise your essay until it makes your case in a clear and compelling way. Model outline. Opening. Lead with a topic sentence that identifies the work you're writing about and offers a strong thesis statement. Middle. Present a series of paragraphs, each with a clear topic sentence, that expand on your thesis and present supporting evidence from the work. Conclusion. Show how the arguments and evidence you have presented in the paper support your thesis statement. What is an interpretation? What does it mean when you're asked to interpret a piece of literature or other writing? What is an interpretation? An interpretation is an analysis of the meaning of the work that goes beyond its surface meanings and finds deeper significance. Interpretation depends on reading between the lines to find what is suggested in the work, not just its literal meaning. Many students fall into the trap of writing a plot summary rather than real interpretation. You may need to provide a brief plot summary to support your analysis, but you shouldn't substitute one for the other. Assume that your reader has read the text you're writing about, and offer a plot summary only to orient your reader and enlarge on your ideas. Here are a few examples of how interpretation works. Literal meaning. Shakespeare's Richard II is the story of a king who made bad choices, treated his supporters badly, and suffered the consequences of his behavior. Interpretation. Shakespeare's Richard II examines ideas about kingship and the characteristics of a worthy ruler. Literal meaning. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye tells the story of a little black girl who wants to be white. Interpretation. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye explores the destructive consequences of the notion of ideal beauty to girls and women, in particular the destructive influence of the ideal of white beauty on girls and women of color. Literal meaning. John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath follows the lives of a family displaced by the Dust Bowl and looking for a better life. Interpretation. John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath condemns the inequitable economic system that forms the basis of modern capitalism. How do you develop an interpretation? Developing an interpretation starts with a careful and alert reading of the text. There are many different questions you can ask to begin to reveal a text's deeper meaning. How does the setting of the story affect its meaning? Would a different setting change the meaning of the work? What about the time period? What physical details strike you? Geography, weather, time of year? Who are the main characters? How do they speak? What do they want? How do they relate to one another? Are there conflicts among the characters? About what? Do the characters change? How? What is the main conflict in the work as a whole? How does it develop and resolve? Who narrates the work? Is the narrator a character in the work or a voice outside the world of the work? Think about the kind of language used. Writers often use symbols and metaphors to help point readers to a deeper interpretation of their works. Titles often give an indication of deeper meaning of a work. What do you think the title means? Examining these questions will help you delve into the meaning of the work beyond the simple development of the plot. Can an interpretation be wrong? A range of different interpretations of the same work may all be arguably correct. A rich piece of literature may have multiple meanings. For instance, you may interpret the novel Moby Dick in a variety of ways, focusing on issues of megalomania, social and class relations, or religion, to name just a few. However, not all interpretations are necessarily valid. Although an interpretation may be a personal reflection, it cannot be completely idiosyncratic. Moby Dick, which was written in 1851, cannot possibly be about the Internet or airplanes. For an interpretation to be valid, you must be able to show evidence in the text that supports it. You may quote parts of the text that support the meanings you see, or provide a brief summary of the relevant incidents in the book. You may also quote from secondary sources. for instance, critical essays, to support your interpretation. Refer back to the section, They Say, I Say, Some Strategies for Quoting and Responding to Sources, for guidance in using secondary sources. Do start early. The process of developing your ideas and writing your essay takes time, and it's difficult to rush it. Make sure you give yourself enough time to do a good job. Do choose an interesting thesis statement that you can support. Make sure you have enough evidence to support your thesis before you start writing. If you can't find enough, choose another topic for your paper. Trying to write an essay with an indefensible thesis statement is a miserable experience, and the end result won't be good. Take the time to develop a thesis statement that will work. Do use present tense, not past tense, to describe literary action. Write, Hamlet sees the ghost of his father, not Hamlet saw the ghost of his father. Do make sure each paragraph has a topic sentence and covers only one main point. Do use transitional sentences to link your points and advance your argument. Do use quotations from the work to illustrate and support the points you're making. Do make sure the length of your quotations is appropriate for the overall length of the essay. If your essay is 5 paragraphs long, a quotation that itself takes up an entire paragraph is too long. Find a way to trim it so that you present only the most important and relevant part. Do sum up your essay with a strong conclusion. Make sure your conclusion refers back to your thesis and the evidence you've presented in the essay and doesn't go off in a different direction. Do consider quoting from other sources, such as literary critics, to support your position. Do choose a good title for your essay. Your title should reflect the content of your essay, not just repeat the title of the work you're writing about. Don't write a long summary and think you're done. You may want to summarize parts of the work to explain your analysis of it, but you need to go beyond summarizing and actually offer an interpretation. Don't include a lot of random facts about the author and the literary work. Include only those facts that are relevant to your interpretations of the work. Don't write about the author's life unless that information is directly relevant to your interpretation of the work. Don't quote any more from the work than is necessary to make your point. Learn to use quotations for the maximum effect rather than quoting very long passages. Don't take passages from a book, article, or website without using the proper citation format. If you don't understand what you should cite or how you should cite it, ask your teacher or professor to explain it to you, or go to a school or campus tutorial center. Failing to cite other people's ideas can lead to charges of plagiarism, which can be very serious. Refer back to the previous section, Plagiarism and How to Avoid It. Not like this. The Great Gatsby. This essay needs a better title to give the reader a more specific idea of what it's about. F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel, The Great Gatsby, was first published in 1925 and has been reprinted numerous times. A native of St. Paul, Minnesota, Fitzgerald is considered one of the greatest of American authors, and The Great Gatsby is rightly viewed as one of his masterpieces. This information is correct. However, it's very general and doesn't serve to introduce this writer's argument about the book. At this point, it feels as though the writer hasn't quite decided what he wants to write about and is just tap dancing until an idea emerges. If you find your essay begins this way, go back and revise the opening once you have a clear idea of your thesis. The Great Gatsby was written in the years between the First World War and the Great Market Crash of 1929, during a period of economic prosperity and social change known as the Jazz Age. Gatsby reflects many of the key issues of the Jazz Age. Yes, it does. But what are the key issues of the Jazz Age, and which ones in particular will this essay discuss? Any essay, particularly a short one like this, needs a tight focus and a clear thesis statement. There is no way this writer can cover all this ground here. In the beginning of The Great Gatsby, we are introduced to the narrator, Nick, a young man who has come from the Midwest to work in the New York bond business. He rents a house on Long Island and finds that among his neighbors are his cousin Daisy and her husband, Tom. He visits Daisy and Tom in their mansion and finds Tom to be very wealthy but arrogant and bullying. There are also hints that Tom is having an affair and that Daisy is unhappy. Later in the novel, Nick meets Tom's girlfriend, Myrtle, a shallow and pretentious woman who is not of Tom's social class. There's too much plot summary here and not enough analysis. The writer has identified some potentially interesting material, such as the disparity between Tom and Myrtle's social standing, but the essay doesn't get beyond plot summary into actual interpretation. Nick's next-door neighbor is a mysterious wealthy man called J. Gatsby. Nick hears wild rumors about Gatsby and the source of his wealth. People said that Gatsby made his money through criminal activities or that he came from a wealthy family, and there were rumors about Gatsby being a war hero in World War I. The writer has inadvertently slipped into past tense here. All literary action should be described in the present tense. All Nick knows is that Gatsby throws wild and opulent parties. When Nick is invited to a party, he describes the scenes of excess. On weekends, his Rolls-Royce became an omnibus, bearing parties to and from the city between 9 in the morning and long past midnight. And on Mondays, 8 servants, including an extra gardener, toiled all day with mops and scrubbing brushes and hammers and garden shears, repairing the ravages of the night before. Every Friday, 5 crates of oranges and lemons arrived from a fruitier in New York. Every Monday, these same oranges and lemons left his back door in a pyramid of pulpless halves. There was a machine in the kitchen which could extract the juice of 200 oranges in half an hour if a little button was pressed 200 times by a butler's thumb. 44. This is quite a long quotation. The writer could have made his point with only a part of it. Eventually, Nick learns the truth about J. Gatsby's personal background. It turns out that his real name was Gats, and he was a runaway boy from a very ordinary family, not the aristocratic family he had pretended to be from. The writer has drifted into past tense again here. His money, in fact, comes from shady dealings with the Jewish gangster Meyer Wolfsheim, primarily from bootlegging liquor. In identifying Wolfsheim as a Jew, the writer has an opportunity to analyze the society in which The Great Gatsby takes place, but he doesn't take advantage of the opportunity to develop an argument. Nick is shocked to discover the truth, but somehow still admires Gatsby and sympathizes with him. As the story develops, we learn that Gatsby and Daisy were previously involved in a relationship and that they are still in love with each other. The essay lacks a thesis statement and paragraphs lack topic sentences. As a result, the essay feels more like a wandering plot summary than an actual analysis. In fact, Gatsby has been giving his lavish parties merely as a way to attract Daisy back to him. Gatsby and Daisy begin an affair, which eventually will become deadly for Gatsby. Through a series of events, Tom's girlfriend, Myrtle, is killed by Gatsby's car, and Gatsby is left to take the blame for the killing, even though it was Daisy behind the wheel. Myrtle's husband takes revenge by killing Gatsby, and Tom and Daisy leave town, refusing to accept responsibility for their parts in the deaths. The Great Gatsby reflects the sense of discontent and corruption that lay beneath the glitz of the American Jazz Age. It is seen to be, in fact, a time of moral bankruptcy, perhaps foretelling the fiscal bankruptcy that is to come from the market crash and the Great Depression. This is an interesting idea that could form the thesis for an entire paper. Unfortunately, it's not developed. At the end of the novel, Nick bids farewell to Gatsby's sadly abandoned mansion and leaves New York, back home to the Midwest and the solid values he remembers from there. Throughout the essay, the writer has depended more on plot summary than on actual analysis of the book. There are some good insights in this draft that could be developed much further into an engaging interpretation, but the writer has missed the mark. Work cited: Fitzgerald F. Scott, The Great Gatsby, 1925. New York, Scribner, 1995. Print. Like this. The Great Gatsby and the Dark Side of the Jazz Age. F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel, The Great Gatsby, is set in 1920s America after World War I and before the stock market crash that brought about the Great Depression. Although Fitzgerald depicts scenes of great wealth, consumption, and glamorous parties, he also shows the underside of America at that time. Ultimately, The Great Gatsby reveals how the corruption and decadence under the glitz of the Jazz Age undermined the American dream of the past and left the future uncertain. The first paragraph ends with a strong thesis statement. Although J. Gatsby is initially presented as a charismatic character, ultimately his lifestyle and values are decadent and empty. Nick, the narrator, describes the casual excesses of Gatsby's famous parties. Quote, "There was a machine in the kitchen which could extract the juice of 200 oranges in half an hour if a little button was pressed 200 times by a butler's thumb." End quote. 44. The writer uses quotations from the book economically to support his point. There are rumors about Gatsby's past and the source of his wealth, but Gatsby tells Nick that he comes from a wealthy family and has an honorable past. By the end of the novel, however, we have learned that Gatsby comes from very humble beginnings, and that he is not the American aristocrat he has pretended to be. Nor is he the honest, self-made man that so many Americans aspire to become. His wealth actually comes from criminal activities. Gatsby has remade himself and compromised his integrity in the quest for wealth. His abandoned and dusty mansion near the end of the novel is a symbol of the emptiness and falseness of his adopted identity. Quote, "There was an inexplicable amount of dust everywhere, and the rooms were musty." End quote. 154. If Fitzgerald is critical of the sources and consequences of Gatsby's new money, the world of old money, in East Egg, is shown to be equally morally bankrupt. The third paragraph begins with a clear transition. The second paragraph has been about the emptiness of new money, and this paragraph will be about old money. Nick's cousin, Daisy, whose rank and easy, natural aristocratic manner Gatsby idolizes, is married to Tom Buchanan, the hulking and thoughtless heir of a large fortune. We learn early in the book that Tom is cheating on Daisy. In fact, he brings Nick along on a visit to his mistress. Tom's girlfriend, Myrtle, is shallow and pretentious. Near the end of the book, Tom and Daisy allow Gatsby to take the blame for Myrtle's death, which Daisy has caused, leading to Gatsby's murder. Tom and Daisy leave the area immediately afterward. Later, Nick meets Tom on the street in New York, and Tom justifies his actions. Nick reflects that Tom and Daisy are, quote, "careless people," end quote, who, quote, "smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness, and let other people clean up the mess they had made." End quote. 188. A carefully chosen quotation closes the paragraph. And rather than taking us through a plot summary, the writer has carefully selected details from the book to support his argument about the book and to develop his interpretation. Fitzgerald uses imagery throughout the book to illustrate the rot and destruction that underlies the glittering world of moneyed people. A remarkable passage early in the book sets the tone. Nick describes what he calls as a, quote, "valley of ashes," end quote, that he sees every day from the train on the way into New York. quote, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat, where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and of ashen-gray men who move grimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. End quote. Nick explains that the train always waits at this industrial dumping site for at least a minute. Quote, and it was because of this that I first met Tom Buchanan's mistress. End quote. 28. This shocking graphic scene hangs over the entire book, suggesting the consequences of material, quote, prosperity, end quote, and its effect on human beings. The Great Gatsby is a story of extremes, extreme ambition and wealth, and extreme decay and decrepitude. The beginning of the concluding paragraph ties together the content of the previous paragraphs. Fitzgerald shows the dark side of the glittering Jazz Age. Near the end of the book, Nick reminisces about his home in the Midwest and his memories. What is really important to Nick is the genuine warmth of human relationships. He describes scenes of young people returning from prep school for Christmas, meeting in a train station. Quote, I remember the fur coats of the girls, and the chatter of frozen breath, and the hands waving overhead as we caught sight of old acquaintances. End quote. 183 to 84. This warm scene seems far in the past, though. Nick will never get back to the innocence he had in those days, and for him, the world will never be innocent again. The book ends with painful comment on our inability to reclaim our past and, by implication, the country's past, which is lost forever. Quote, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. End quote. 189. The closing paragraph returns to the idea of the thesis statement in light of the information provided in the essay. Work cited: Fitzgerald F. Scott, The Great Gatsby, 1925, New York, Scribner, 1995, print.